This is sort of a weird question, and if it feels too weird,
you
don't have
weird.
to answer.
I am weird. I'm a psychic, for God's sake.
Okay, if you and I had met, this would have been almost 30 years ago. I just graduated college. I said to you, I'm on my way to Washington, D.C. to do an internship at the White House. If you had stuff coming in about what was about to happen to me,
right,
would you have felt you ethically needed to tell me? Laura, I am so excited for this conversation today.
Me too.
Really, truly.
It's been a while.
I know. Welcome to
making.
Reclaiming. I know it has taken us a while because I feel like we first started talking about this when I met you.
In April.
April at your book party. So for your 7th book, The Prism, and I'm going to read the subtitle, 7 Steps to Heal Your Past and Transform Your Future. And I've heard you say a version of something like, it's a way to understand you. It's the user manual for you.
Yes,
Is that
for
accurate?
being human, absolutely. The original title that I wanted was Human Architecture.
Right,
because
which I
it
love.
really is. It's the blueprint of us in the world.
Right. So those were the human architecture, the prism. I mean, it all sort of, it folds into a kind of world that allows us to both feel and see, in a sense, which is interesting, both of those terms, if you think, I mean, for me, that's what comes up is sort of this, like a structured emotion, almost in a way.
That was the one difficulty I really had with the name The Prism, was that although now I see it is human architecture, it's a prism, but it really isn't about feeling, because feeling is so misleading.
Okay.
And it's about how do you use your actions to interface with the world in a way you get the response you want.
Right.
And it's to some degree mechanical because our reality is to some degree mechanical, which is a strange thing to say from an intuitive. Nice word for a psychic.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think what's interesting is when you think about the sort of trajectory of your 7 books, starting with Practical Intuition in 1996, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you think about that trajectory. In the middle there, you had the circle. And is that right?
Yes, but the circle was actually which is the precursor to this, was the first system that came to me because I was in a terrible situation. And the bad thing about being an intuitive is you remember nothing and you walk into walls and you can't remember enough to have good table conversation. The good thing is when you ask a question, you get information. And I was in a terrible situation, and my question was, not even how did I get here, but how do I get out of it? So the circle came, and the circle led me to Practical Intuition.
Okay.
So I knew the circle, Practical Intuition was an instant New York Times bestseller, and I knew the circle wouldn't be. It's a little too esoteric, at least for the time, for 1996. We live in different times now, by decades. Yeah. So Practical Intuition, though, which was really based on the scientific study of me by universities and adapting that so people could find their own intuitive ability, I knew that was the one that would do well. So that I did first.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. I was thinking about, because I listened to you on Elise Loenin's Pulling the Thread, who's a friend that we have in common.
And a best-selling author.
Exactly. And she had talked to me about you before we actually met.
This is the Women's Champion Network, right?
I know, exactly. And so it's interesting because I had this weird thing happen with my trusty little interview map, which is that I normally have a really strong sense of where I want to go into a conversation. And I didn't have that here. I kept hitting roadblocks. And so I didn't know, not in a putting you on the spot intuitive, right? But I was like, is there something you needed to tell me? Or is there somewhere you feel you want to start this conversation today?
I think that The Prism actually is your book, and that's true for many people, in that especially incredible, capable, smart, successful people have a system that works for them, but they also have systems because the system works for them and there is no crisis to slam them into rearranging it. They get stuck in their habits. So there are little categories in life that are chronically absent. And so what the Prism does is it says, okay, what is it that's absent? What do you want in your life right now that really just doesn't appear? You keep thinking you're doing it differently, but you're not. And we don't have the answer inside. We're a closed system. The answer is always outside with a catalyst in interaction. So you would pick the issue and then you'd go to that section and you'd change a rule. And the idea of the Prism, because intuition opens up so much information that we're all capable of, but lots of information often it just isn't that helpful. What the Prism does is it gives those small mechanical actions that you do that create a change, that are outside of you. With a great myth, I think there are a bunch of myths. One of the biggest myths is that the answer is accessible inside. Our habits keep us together, but our habits also keep change out. And so we can't find that inside. And I think there's a lot of looking at our trauma, looking deeply within. And the reality is all that looking replaces action, and a tiny action makes a huge change, if it's the right one.
And sort of marry for me what you just said with the concept of an idea of intuition. Like I've been aware of intuition for a long time, and I've struggled, I think, myself with the sense of how do I know when something is intuition? How do I know when
you don't?
Okay.
So
Interesting.
People. I love my beginning students because they come equipped with their meditation practice and breathing and a crystal and whatever, unless they're bankers, in which case they come equipped with, well, let this prove this to me, which actually is a better position of attention to be able to do it. And they overcomplicate a super simple process. They want something, they want to get to that intuitive state, and then they want to know they're right. That's the opposite of intuition. You're intuitive all the time. And really, in order to get the data and be able to identify it in that messy place that is our inner being, you just need to know what your target is, what your question is, what your goal is. And you need to minimize them so that it's not just a morass of confusion. So you need a goal, and you also need to not prep a state. The way you know your intuition is right is that what you predict happens. The conversation telepathically that you've been having that you think is in your head, you check it out and find out that actually the other person has been engaging in it too. Your remote viewing, you practice looking at some place you will be going that you've never seen before. You take good notes because, again, memory is tricky, and you verify it. And what happens after a while, you never know you're right because that's reason. But what happens after a while is that you train your perceptions so that when you're looking metaphorically in a certain way, you get something that can be verified or disproven. And it's just as helpful to be able to disprove something. But again, we go into that realm of feeling when you say, well, how do I know? That's really a feeling. Knowing is actually a feeling in that context. And you don't. What happens is you realize you get a process, you apply that process over and over, and it becomes extremely reliable. The least reliable person for you to get intuition about is yourself. Because you know what you want, you know what you avoid, you are a prism. And until you evolve that structure that was put in place when you were a tiny child, you can't really have any perspective. And intuition's about data. People think intuition's about, goodness and spirit and all that stuff. No, it's about data. It's about knowing when, where, what, who, and why.
Right. And your background, I know you prefer not to use the word psychic and intuitive.
I'm fine at this point. I'm going to be 67. It's all,
Well, I use intuitive too, because I think I fall very much on the woo-woo scale. So you will get a crystal at the end of our conversation.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I give everybody a crystal.
You are so funny.
Because it's an exchange of energy.
Yes, but so is this.
Right. But that's the point, is that for me is I think when people, you came, you drove here, you showed up, you put your makeup on and your clothes, and you're giving to all of us, you're giving to me for this show. I want to give something back.
I love that.
So I give everyone a crystal. But I fall into that space, but I'm also very much fall into the science and the physics and the quantum physics and the belief around, I think, time being circular, not linear, which I think is some of what you talk about too, right?
Absolutely, except that, I almost jump over all of that and just say, this is what works. Mm-hmm. What's really important is what works, because what we underestimate is in ourselves and with everyone else, is that life is complicated, and we don't really know how to do it if we want to make a change. We know how to recreate the things we've created all along, but we don't know how to do it differently. Mm-hmm. So I'm really very much about your chess pieces. This piece moves that way. You want to get here, you're going to want to use your rook. Mm-hmm. You want to get here, you're going to want to use your pawn. Mm-hmm. And just those very simple acts of doing it. Intuition, though, is amazing because we live in a synchronous world, meaning people are always looking for signs, like a penny heads up. Everything's a sign. Mm-hmm. Every single piece of your life is an example of that inner blueprint that you are creating, and you are the creator. Mm-hmm. What I've loved about my career with intuition is when I started, which was the early 80s.
Right.
Only like freaks with lots of cats on fifth floor walk-ups did this. However, I was being studied by scientists and probably military funded, but no one ever knows. Lots
Men
of,
who
lots
stare
of
at
it have
goats,
come out. That's
right.
I didn't come into intuition through any kind of spirituality. Although I think everything's spiritual, but I came to it through really being a test subject for research on what are the capacities of human consciousness. Right. Consciousness not meaning, some elevated concept, but can you view this military target that's being built and what's going to happen? Can you look inside a human body? Can you find oil if I give you a map?
Right.
Really very data-heavy work. And I like that because I come from, as my son says, a batshit crazy family. And that little line between psychic and psychotic, I really, even at the age of 20 when all of this started, I wanted to make sure that if I crossed that line, it was with a pinky toe, not with my whole foot.
Were you scared when you sort of started to realize that you had these abilities, even though I know that so much of what you teach is that we all have these abilities? But as you're saying, did that freak you out in any way?
No.
Okay.
I was, first of all, I was so happy. I mean, go back. I'm 20, 21. I've had a disastrous childhood.
Right. I mean, if I remember correctly, you were at the age of 5, you were raising your 3 siblings.
I was living alone in an apartment with 3 younger children, with my parents next door, unconnected, big steel door between us. It was a kind of a crazy upbringing. And it was one actually that gave me this system, although it didn't solidify for me until 15 years ago.
Okay.
When after the deaths of my suicides of my siblings, I thought, why did I survive? I mean, really, the honest truth was I was not that pretty. I was skinny. I hadn't really developed. I come from a family of absolute geniuses, Harvard, Stanford, Columbia geniuses. I was not that. I had ADD, so even if I was a genius, there was no way that I was going to be able to...
Academically genius.
Yeah, I was not an academic genius.
Okay, but I think you're...
and I was in a school...
You're a genius.
I was in a school that academically was all about math and science geniuses. And I was just so happy that there was something, albeit a little weird, special about me. That's really how I felt. Because none of this was a revelation. Like I didn't, think of yourself at 20 or 21. You think, you think you're weird in every bad way, but also that the whole world can do everything you can do. It never occurred to me why I was so unpopular at the third grade lunch table, that most people don't know that someone's grandmother is going to die 2 days before it happens. And so it put, in a serious sense, it put in context for me a lot of things that I thought were social flaws that really were just, oh, I see. You don't know you see that. And it comes out of my mouth, and that can be a little intrusive.
So take me through a little bit, just the timeline. I know you're talking about your family. Your dad was a doctor, right? Or is a doctor?
Was
it? What kind of doctor? My dad's a
He
doctor.
was a nephrologist, and then when the young guys did dialysis in the office, just became an internist. But he was a very violent, narcissistic man, and my mother was a manic depressive who you had to remind to put clothes on to go out when she was manic. I think in a lot of parts of society, there are 5-year-olds who know how to take care of children, but in ours, there wasn't. I mean, we were surrounded by wealth, and yet lived in an apartment that often didn't have food in it for 3 days. So it wasn't a confusing childhood because children adapt. I mean, that is the amazing thing we forget about children. They adapt. It twists them for the future, but they adapt in the moment. My entire family have what people like to call unique neurology. And with my brother, it made him a brilliant mathematician and physicist. With my sister, it made her a brilliant lawyer, and the other one's also an artist and mathematician. And with me, it was completely, being the oldest, focused on survival. And my work, I always tell my students, your pathology can become your potential. Keeping us alive, figuring out which neighbors had big dinners and we could drop by their houses, all of that intuitive knowing what was beyond my senses was such a life-saving ability for me. And ultimately, I think that's why I survived my siblings. But we don't know we're different, and we certainly don't know we're special. I was so happy that there was something special.
That's really interesting. Really interesting to me. I don't know that we talk enough about the import of that feeling of specialness. I think in some ways that's part of what got me in a lot of trouble in my early 20s of looking for and wanting to be special and feeling that feeling of specialness, of validation. And when it came, I fell into that, making bad decisions a lot of times, not just in DC, but in a lot of different ways.
But I also think that bad decisions are, they are part of the road test. I mean, I'm still making some bad decisions, and I used to want to smack her for this, but my friend Demi Moore, who's so much more woo-woo than I am,
but she's amazing.
She's amazing. I mean, that goes
she
without
has goddess
saying.
energy.
She's not just goddess, but supreme commander and sage of the world energy. But she would say to me, Laura, don't ask, why is this happening to me? Say, what is this doing for me? And at first I was very nasty to her about it, like, oh, please, I'm calling for some compassion here. And then I thought about it, and I thought, oh, wow, and now I use it in all my workshops. Because it is, why is this happening for me? Even if not everything happens for a reason, it's our job to give it reason. If we don't want to be victims, and, being a victim is making someone else the hero of your story. In Welcome to Your Crisis, which is a book I wrote with all of these psychiatrists I had done favors for, I wrote, mud in your face is a symbol that you're doing right. You're going in the right direction because you're doing something that isn't part of your history. You're doing something new. And if you do something new, a snake is most vulnerable when they're shedding skin between old skin and new skin. It's important to walk into those walls. And it's unfortunate. I mean, I do think, I work with a lot of well-known people, not just in Hollywood, but, people who run huge corporations. And it's unfortunate when your walls are documented for the public. I've had a little of that too, even though I shouldn't have. But it's part of the process. And often it's the quick way.
What do you mean by the quick way?
Because as mammals, we don't like change. So when we have no choice, when we really create that disaster, it forces us to change in ways that we would have taken so long to change if it had just been an evolution. Sometimes revolutions are great. Most of the time, evolutions are better because they don't disrupt, which is really what the Prism is about. It's how do we evolve? And I think you were speaking about knowing that we're unique. It's a very confusing, especially as an intuitive where you have a sense of the one. We are one with everyone and everything. But it's our job to be individuals. It's really our job to be an I and to stand up for it. I believe, I want, I hate, I love, I choose, I build. Everything that's an I is your separateness, your individuality, your ego, although ego is such a dirty word.
Well, right, but there's a lot about the ego in the Prism, right? I mean, you're sort of...
Because the ego is the only way you create. I mean, if you think of it, if you're omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, you're not changing much. You don't have to. We change. And when I get, I have a tendency to be a tiny bit irritable.
I'll do my best not to irritate you today.
and I remind myself, wait a sec, every single person is doing my job for me. We all as individuals are changing that whole, that world we live in, that energy that is all of us, that all the sciences are now agreeing that this field is unified, if not actually just one energy. And it contextualizes things for me.
When I'm at home, I want to be as comfortable in what I'm wearing as I am watching TV on the couch. Well, the jogger set from Cozy Earth helps me do just that. It moves with me throughout my entire day. It's breathable and soft in a way that actually holds up wash after wash. In fact, it keeps getting softer and cozier. What I especially love is that I can work from home and be ready for anything. Last-minute Zooms, a delivery, or even if someone wants to drop by. Cozy Earth also backs everything with a 100-night trial because they're confident you'll feel the difference. And if you don't, returning it is simple. Plus, these are made to last. A 10-year warranty on your homeware isn't something you see often. It's the kind of commitment that tells you something about how they're made. This spring, give yourself the kind of comfort that lives with you all day, not just the moment you get home. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code RECLAIMING for an exclusive 20% off. And if you see a post-purchase survey, please mention that you heard about Cozy Earth right here on Reclaiming with Monica Lewinsky. Comfort lives here. When you did Practical Intuition in '96, and it sort of explodes into it's a New York Times bestseller, what do you think people and sort of the collective was hungry for at that time, if you have a sense of that?
That's really an interesting question, and I really don't know the answer to that. I think my sense right now, in retrospect, is that I normalized an experience we all have. And on one hand, people like to have the knowing that intuition gives you because it gives us a sense of control.
Right.
But the actuality, the reality of intuition, the fact that feeling something that someone else is feeling at a distance is not always pleasant. Viewing locations that are scary, that take you out of your immediate environment, is not always safe feeling. Knowing the future and trying not to know what you know so you can live the moment, not always that nice. Hearing what someone's thinking can be very confusing. People say, did I start the conversation or did they? No way of knowing. So, I think that it normalized an experience people are having.
Yeah.
And so, and also, in all fairness, I had an amazing editor who is now a multiple New York Times bestseller, Craig Nelson. I also had Demi Moore go on to Oprah with me, and Oprah have me on for an hour on her fabulous show. I was literally shaking so much before that because, again, I'm an introvert. They sandwiched me. They put their arms around me, and Oprah looked at me and said, "Don't worry, honey, we'll do this for you." Which they did, thank God, because I was just like, I love being in front of an audience. They're part of me, and I'm having a conversation with them, and I'm enjoying it. But then I didn't even like going to the grocery store.
Right. Well, I mean, so much of, I think, like, I find you fascinating and I like you and I think you're brilliant, but I also wanted to have you on the show too because, just this idea around that we all have intuition, that we don't necessarily, we haven't honed that skill, we've lost it. So it's about getting it back in a way.
Absolutely. And it's also
reclaiming
about
it.
Directing it because, I have so many shoes in my shoe closet that I can never find a pair of shoes. There's so much information that comes in intuitively, but it's useless.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, life is fabulous and amazing and really, really, really complicated and hard. And intuition will give you the shortest route. It's a wormhole.
Right.
The shortest route between you and what you want. And it comes from outside of you. It's new information, and we all have access. And a miracle takes a moment, and we forget that. We think we need to look inside and change our behaviors and do this and do. No, if you change how you walk to work by a block, you're already opening up a new door to new people, to new experiences. It literally takes a moment. And a tiny bit of sun will make your plants grow. Too much sun causes a drought and kills them. And we all think we need to make these massive changes. But actually, what I have found in teaching tens of thousands of people, not all celebrities. I have taught in homeless shelters, and is that we all have that capacity to create that miracle in a moment, but we need the right small move, and that's what's missing. Is having someone give us that right little catalyst, that little extra bit of sun that will make us grow and not fry us.
I've always thought of my intuition or experienced it as a whisper that comes through.
It's a club. Intuition will club you until you make a change, and then it will bring in all kinds of crises, and it'll have you interface with the world in a way that you hear it, which is why it's smart to listen. It's the same reason we follow rules, because if you don't, you're punished. If you don't listen, because what is intuition? Intuition is your subconscious knowing your future, trying to get you to perceive the data to make a choice that's going to allow you to thrive. Because your subconscious job is actually to keep you alive. Right. And so it will put a disaster in your life to make you change in a way that you will thrive.
Right.
A lot of people use intuitives as therapists, and they're not. The data doesn't give you the process. Right. Doesn't hold you through the experience. It's not coaching. It's if you do this, this will happen. If you do that, this will happen. This is what's coming up. If you do this, it will change. And they're data points, and they're not. You need to deal with your sense of unworthiness. It's not that. And I think it gets dressed up as that. I think the scary part of intuition is we have 1 million monitors that we wear all the time to tell us how have we slept and what's our heart rate and this. You are your own monitor. if something doesn't, one of your five senses, some of us are feel, some of us smell, see, hear, but if something's not right, that is the sensor you need to trust and not to lose touch with. It's not a feeling. There's a difference between a feeling, an emotion, and a data point. And the data point is you're about to leave for a meeting and just doesn't seem right. And if you take that to the next beat or call an intuitive friend and say, what's going on with this meeting? They'll tell you. And then you prepare. And you prepare in practical ways. There's so much that goes on with, I go on Instagram and everyone who's been out of neurology school for 10 minutes or out of therapy or psychiatry for 10 minutes has some kind of deep way for you to look into your trauma. Research shows that looking into trauma re-traumatizes. When you do something different, that trauma is going to come up. And you find tools to deal with it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I found it very helpful. My therapist is a trauma psychiatrist. And I think that there was a period
Who probably focuses on neurology.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think that what was interesting, and she brings in a lot of different perspectives, Eastern medicine, a lot of different ways of looking at things, parts therapy. And I think that what was interesting to me was as my life started to change publicly, so that I think as people started to see me understand my true self a bit better, that there were like layers of history and trauma that I was shedding. And what that ended up doing was bringing up a lot of other things that had been hidden and masked because of the big trauma from 1998. Right. And in the course of that, what was interesting to me was there were a whole bunch of narratives that would start to come through, but without a lot of detail. And she felt, she said, you don't need to know exactly what happened to you to move forward. It's really I think that's so what you're saying is.
And trauma therapists actually don't work with the story. They work with how the wiring, how the prism was damaged and continues to damage your life, because it's never the original trauma. It's how you re-traumatize yourself now through changed behaviors and changed perceptions that continues that injury. So it really is, it's so much about wiring. And I think people are very disempowered by a lot of both technology and how information comes in, from realizing that not only do you have the answer, although you may not have your answer, but I have your answer. You have my answer. We are useful to one another on a very essential level because of intuition. And that's where intuition is beautiful. I do these, Soho House has been very generous to me. Anywhere I go in the world, and I travel all the time, they give me a room. And they put up a little thing, and I do a free workshop. And in an hour, people who don't even believe in intuition, but, they finish their martini, they have nothing to do between me and the disco at night, so they come by. They do amazing readings in an hour. You just have to give them the direction. And then the lesson there is, wait. All the time, I have known what someone else is thinking, or what's happening in someone else's life, or what's happening in someone else's physiology, or what will happen to someone else. This wonderful journalist, her name is Danielle Lawler, and she did something for one of the posh London magazines. And she came to one of my Soho House events in London. And she sat with someone, and she's a journalist, she's a critical thinker, and they were so shocked at how much information they got for each other completely. They didn't know each other, didn't know each other's lives, how detailed it was, and then how much of it happened precognitively. They predicted that they're still in touch.
Oh, how
they
interesting.
Still read each other.
I know you do a whole long workshop of what you're talking about, but where does that start? If we were doing that here right now, where does that?
It starts by, I write down a goal, And then I ask you, to just notice where your attention goes. And, you might let me think of one so we can really do this. I'm not going to tell you what the goal is, though, because it's private, because I actually want this. Okay. How
do I close my eyes?
No. Okay. Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Okay.
So there is no intuitive state. Your intuitive state is you cooking pasta, you on the toilet, you walking. Intuition's always a part of you. It's where your attention goes. And people who prepare with a state actually kill their intuition because their attention goes to preparing the state. So, for example, you don't close your eyes because, by the way, when you need your intuition is when you're being attacked in a meeting or when there's an opportunity in a meeting, on the road, in an argument. And there, you're not going to go like this, right? You want to go to that place. You want to have the question ready. And learning to target, learning to ask the right question for everybody is really the first step in honing an intuitive skill. What is really the question? When will I be happy? Well, when you have a head injury. I mean, that's not a question.
Right.
What are you actually asking? What is the actual target? Because then when you refine that, you'll identify the data that comes in much more clearly. So when my students, I do something called boot camp, which is a training, and when they say, well, I see green, I see love, drink more water. First of all, drink more water. You've told me nothing I can prove. Why should I believe you? But also those make no sense. And that's not actually how our information works. And I use C. We use our five senses. There is no sixth sense. It's your five senses moving around in time and space. So if we slow it down a little, and I'm going to have you do it. I'm going to ask, I'll do it for you in private. So I have the target, and it's always good to know that either you have a target, which you do by writing it down. And I like the exercise, for those of you listening, of taking 10 index cards that are identical and writing 10 different targets. Okay. And then you have someone else put them in an envelope. You hold an envelope and you write everything that comes.
Okay. Well, can you just go one layer deeper on what you mean by target?
What exactly is your question? So my question, will all my bags arrive in Rome safely on the 19th? Is this investment one, not a good one, because then you have to define good, and the more you split attention, the less accurate you are. So is buying an apartment in France going to be profitable as an investment in the next 10 years? So I've really defined. Sometimes we can't define, but our information reflects that. So, for example, I work with 4 large companies. That's how I make my living predicting the future. My first job, when they say, is this a good investment? Because yes and no doesn't have enough variables. We want a lot of variables. We don't want to know what we're talking about. My first thing is I have to make a target out of it. So what are they really asking? Okay, my sense is that they have a lack of this industry in their portfolio. Is this going to be their strongest buy? And so in a sense, you're doing a reading just to get the target. Okay. You pick a target. Do you have a very specific target?
Oh my God.
And you're not going to say what it is because that will skew your target. Okay. Do you have a target?
Yes.
Okay. The first thing I sense is it's almost a little hard for me to breathe into my chest. So I feel a lot of anxiety around that right now. And in order to move forward to not feel the anxiety, it's interesting. I get a sense that something crystallized in February around this, although didn't resolve. And I move forward and I move forward and I move forward and I move into the summer. And around July, all of a sudden, I'm feeling a very important connection. And I'm seeing a water, and maybe I'm seeing like big body of water around where this happens. Not as some symbol for something. So you report everything you see. Okay. I'm seeing an interesting thing where something comes back to you around that time, but also something new. And it's going to be a very interesting time of choice. This is going to begin, I think, around the middle of June. And I see these two competing situations. One you thought you hoped for and wanted, but then there's something new that is much more viable. I don't give advice. That's not what intuition is. But I think you're going to know what the right move is, and I think the challenge is going to be to not make the wrong one, which will be really tempting. And you'll begin to know what that wrong one is as soon as May. And I think you know about it. I think there's some occasion or there's something you would know. I think now where there is going to be a connect in May around this. It's interesting because this is this is not what you need to resolve for things to move forward. However, because I think a whole other really exciting thing is happening over here that has nothing to do with this question, which is really helpful for you because it gives a structure to something that otherwise would become a little fanciful.
Okay.
So anyway, I could go on for hours and hours and hours and hours, and I'm trying to be vague enough, but enough that you understand what I'm saying, but vague enough that nobody else does.
Okay.
Which is the trick of a public reading.
Yes, of course. Of course.
And all I'm doing is following my attention. What's my attention? It's my 5 senses. So initially, I felt it was like a little hard to breathe. Now, most people would say, oh, this is me. Like I didn't notice that I had some anxiety here and that I was like, but I know now I'm reading. If I weren't reading, it would be about me, but it's about you. And then I notice where I am in time. And then I move, I saw February. I thought it was next February, but then I realized, no. It's something that kind of sparked this. And so I just notice, and I don't reason it. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But if someone takes notes, so what my companies do, and I've had 2 of them for over 30 years.
Wow.
2 of them have retired, so I've onboarded 2 new ones, and I only take 4 at a time. So I wait till one, ends to take another. They have basically, I guess it's not books. I guess it's on computer, but they take and they check it off as I,
Wow.
And if I make a mistake, believe me, they let me know, which is also very helpful. But it's the way I know that I'm psychic and not psychotic.
Right.
And that's why I work with companies for that reason. I also work with companies because my boot campers, I am coaching, which means I'm also reading them as they're learning to read. So they're owning that power in themselves, and I'm helping them with my own ability. But I think that the difficulty with intuition in kind of the popular market is your intuitive is not a doctor. My pro bono work is working on new drugs and working with doctors with their patients. But I would never say to a person, I might say, I go get a blood test just for the heck of it when I see something. But I would never say to somebody, you have, or do this.
Right.
Because practicing medicine without a license, I think still, even under this administration, is a felony. And it's not, you want for your client the best.
Right. I have a question. Have you ever found yourself with your 4 client companies, have you ever found yourself that there's conflict between what you see, like there's a crossover of somehow something that you might see or information that you're giving to one company is then detrimental to another?
No, because that's why I work with 4 completely different industries that have absolutely, and I also have no memory. I mean, that's, I had a neuropsych eval 10 years ago because I thought at my age, if I don't know what year it is, they're going to think dementia and not ADD, but I was that way at 11.
Right.
So between the fact that I don't remember anything, I don't know what I'm talking about. My clients don't call me and say, well, we're having a negotiation with blah, 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 and what do you think is going to happen? They say, what's going to happen? That is the question.
Okay.
So I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right.
So for example, yesterday a client called me and gave me a company name, and these are companies that aren't public yet. And they said, do you think this is a good company? And I said, well, this is what they do. So I give first data to prove that I hit my target. Right. Not just prove it to them, but prove it to me, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I have no way of checking information. And when you train people in intuition, the hardest thing is to get them to not check out their information in the usual ways. Same thing with changing behavior. A lot of times when I do an intensive, someone will say, well, that doesn't resonate with me. And I'm like, yeah, because the problem resonates with you. Right. The solution won't.
I think it was just interesting to me that, with the company work and that you had been given this sort of the psychic of Wall Street, right, of having seen 2008 coming, right? The 2008 financial crisis.
And that was due to an accident, by the way, because I never predict publicly. Because, what if I'm wrong and some pensioner puts all their money on my prediction?
Right.
Like that's one of the reasons I don't work with civilians, is I don't want that responsibility. Right. I work with people who run billion-dollar companies. They are so much more skilled than I am. If I make a mistake, it's their mistake.
Right.
If I make a mistake with a human, it's it's heartbreaking. But I was tired. And so by accident on an Irish radio show, and I also thought, well, it's an Irish radio show. Who's going to listen to it? I mean, Irish people will, but nobody in my milieu is going. I got sloppy, and he was so charming in that adorable accent. And I made the prediction on air by accident. I slipped. And then, once the cat is out, you can't put it back in. And so normally I would make a prediction like that, and nobody would know about it except my companies and my broker, because I sold all my stocks after that radio show. But it became very public, and actually I only take one Wall Street client because I can only take one client from each industry.
Yeah. Do you look at that sort of what you're calling a slip up because you were tired now, and do you think that there actually was the benefit that had
There was a synchronicity. I mean, I am because, I guess luckily for me, there's been a lot of interest in how my brain works by groups that have tested me. I know that, for example, I'm as introverted as you get on the Myers-Briggs scale. And so anything public for me is always a mistake. It's always not a mistake, a synchronicity putting me out there. And at the time, that I made that prediction, I really did not want to be out there. It was actually a very difficult time in my life, and I really didn't want to be out there.
What was going on? If you feel comfortable.
I was realizing that a relationship had run its course, and I was also just exhausted. There was too much going on on too many fronts. But also, we don't see what we don't see. And that was a year where I hadn't seen a lot. And then all of a sudden I saw it, and I was like, okay, how do I unsee this now?
When you learn that one, teach me, please.
Right. How do I unsee this? How can I repress this again? And I, just by nature, I had the only press contracts in the book industry that had clauses that I didn't have to do any press.
Right.
Demi dragged me on to Oprah, which I'm so grateful both her and Oprah for in 1996. And Diane Sawyer is the most lovely human on earth, and Mark Robertson, her producer. So that was always easy. I mean, literally, Mark would carry me to the show, and give me my coffee and wrap me up, and But I'm an introvert, and that made me become part of the world, and that was wonderful. Not just because of work, it was wonderful because I was about to leave a relationship, unbeknownst to me, and it put me in a world that was different. Because I stayed as an introvert. I liked my own four walls, same four walls I had always had. I live in the same apartment I lived in at 23, both here and in Rome. That's how much I like change. Now I'm changing my slipcovers. They're 30 years old. I met my husband because I went out of that comfort zone.
And didn't you, is that when you sort of created really reflecting what you were just saying a few minutes ago about what resonates? If it resonates, it's because it's familiar.
Yes.
Not so much that it's a good match, but that that you need to go on 3 dates with somebody and kiss them?
Well, no, what I asked, because I knew I didn't know how to do this.
Right.
So I asked 2 girlfriends of mine who had successful marriages, long successful marriages, to set me up with men. And those are the only men I dated. And they gave me rules because I had obviously mine didn't work. They gave me rules, and the rules were you have to go on 3 dates, and if you can stomach it, you have to force 1 kiss. If the person's willing to kiss you. Not everyone wanted 3 dates with me or a kiss. So I did the 3-date 1 kiss. And when I first met my husband, he had no deep-seated rage. He had good family relations. There were no interesting dark tangles. He was employed, which is still inconvenient. There were so many things going against him. I was just not interested. And he was so calm and rational, and he just wasn't interesting. And I went on the 2nd date, and I went on the 3rd date. And on the 3rd date, because he was going to be a girlfriend or I wasn't going to see him again, I had that 1 kiss, and we've been married 14 years.
Oh, my God.
Or we've been together 14 years. I think we've been married 12.
Yeah.
Hopefully he doesn't hear this and realize I don't remember how long we've been married. But
we can edit it.
Yeah, I'm very happy I married him.
Yes. Fresh air, longer days, a chance to reset. This season, let therapy be part of your spring cleaning, clearing mental clutter, shaking off stuckness, and building something better. Grow Therapy helps you get there. I don't know where I'd be without therapy in my life. Having someone who is there to support you is so key. It's the ultimate reclaiming. Whether it's your first time in therapy or your 50th, Grow makes it easier to find a therapist who fits you, not the other way around. They connect you with thousands of independent, licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, even nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. And if something comes up, you can cancel up to 24 hours in advance at no cost. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Grow accepts over 100 insurance plans. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/reclaiming today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/reclaiming. growtherapy.com/reclaiming. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan. Okay, this is sort of a weird question, and if it feels too weird, you don't have
weird.
to answer.
I am weird. I'm a psychic, for God's sake.
But I was thinking about, okay, if you and I had met, I just gotten out, this would have been almost 30 years ago. I just graduated college. I said to you, I'm on my way to Washington, D.C. to do an internship at the White House. If you had stuff coming in about what was about to happen to me,
right?
Would you have felt you ethically needed to tell me?
No.
Or or
if you
wouldn't
were-
because I needed that to happen.
If you were, no, I don't believe that. I always think there's an easier way. And what happened to you was it's funny, you're one of the few people I remember because even at the time I thought, wow, this is so unfair. Like, this is so not okay. And
Thank you.
It had such an impression. I have no memory, and I remembered that. I don't remember the details of it or the time or whatever.
We'll just leave it that way.
Yes. But I remember I had such a sense of outrage, and I don't follow the news at all, and I also don't remember. I had such a sense of outrage that it remained with me. So you had a champion even before. But no, unless someone is a student, my students find me very intrusive, but they're also very grateful for it most of the time. But unless you're a student or a client, I have learned to keep my mouth shut. There are rare times where at a party, I'll see that someone will come up to me and we'll get in an intimate conversation, and I'll see, or in a gathering, I'll see something and I'll say, I'd like to share something with you, but I do it very vaguely and very carefully, especially if it's a physical thing. I'll do it very carefully, and I won't. Again, I don't do medical information, but I'm like, wow, have you had a chest X-ray lately? Because my doctor really recommended it because I find a way to do it in a social way. But no, I don't feel like I'm Guhu Maharaji Day. I'm someone with a weird brain who can get too much information that I hope is always accurate, but every once in a while it's not, and I don't feel that I have, permission to barge into people's lives. Although I will say honestly, if you ask my husband, I'm very intrusive. If you do sit down with me, it's almost I can't help myself.
Right.
But
I just was thinking about.
It's like, do you need permission to do a reading? And that's a question students ask. And I say, well, you're reading all the time without permission. So that's completely up to you. If you need to have that artifice to do, great.
Well, I think too, there's there's something, okay, so like the financial crisis, that had such a big impact. And I think
I could be wrong. I always assume I'm wrong. That's why I love working for these companies that track how accurate I am, because they'll fire me if I'm wrong.
Will you ever publish those? Do you think like a version of, because I think it would be so interesting to see.
So here is what, you mean publish the predictions? They have them. I don't have them.
No, I know, but I just like if there's a way to anonymize.
They're publicly traded companies. They will definitely never publish it. And actually, around 2008, 2009, in an article, a couple companies that I had worked for came out of the closet, and I told them not to.
Okay.
But they were grateful and they were generous, really generous, and it was not good for them. So now I exchange non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah.
Because I don't even want their generosity, because it's my job as a professional to be an advocate for my students, for the companies I work for, if I lecture for the people I'm like it's my job to be an advocate. If I want something, I'll ask for it. So I'll ask a celebrity. I won't ask companies because they're publicly traded. It could damage it. But I'll ask someone, hey, would you post me? Would you do this for me? Would you write a quote for me? I'll ask somebody to do that. But I do it very, very directly, and I'm really careful. And I love taking no for an answer. And I really. I'm so careful how I do that because actually, especially for a company, my use is that their consultants are in their Prism to have the same blocks. I can tell them what will happen that's outside of that.
Right.
But it makes them look stronger. It helps their image. If they're using a psychic, which is, by the way, much more accepted now, that doesn't help. And it's a real ethical question. So I have no ethics around, can I do a healing without the person knowing, or can I read someone without you're doing that all the time. Your subconscious is reaching out, is looking, is doing that all the time. But where I am careful is where is it my job to serve And where is it someone's job to serve me? So my therapist serves me. Every once in a while, I slip and serve them because I see something that's going on. One of the things that I've been doing that I love, I go on Instagram almost every day and have people do readings for each other without even knowing who the other person is.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've been doing that came to me in using the Prism is doing these activations on YouTube, and I forget what my YouTube is, Laura Day Circle, I think. And they're just things that engage your intuition, give you a behavior, and solve a problem. And they're just literally activations. It's like flipping a switch.
Okay.
So I'm so excited to see how people experience them.
Oh, I'm going to check it out for sure. So the question I ask everybody at the end is if there's anything you are currently working on reclaiming. And we use a very elastic definition here. So it can be, a place or an emotion, hobby.
I realized last year I'm a really good caretaker, and I love caretaking. I mean, that's really what I get my identity for, solving people's problems and making things good for them. And when my husband's out of town, unless I go out or someone comes to my house for dinner, I completely forget to eat until he comes back.
Oh, my gosh.
And I realized that what I need to do is be a human being, not love me, because that whole love yourself, there are lots about me that's not that lovable that I'm working on. So it's not about loving me. It's about actually considering me, doing something for pleasure because it pleasures me, not because it's something to share. So like the Prism is the book for me. I'm working on being an I, having an identity separate and apart from my interface with other people or with the world, because I really do, the joke about me is you leave me in a corner of a couch, you come back a year later, I'm in the same corner in my happy place. I want to be alive before this life is over. So I'm trying very hard to be mindfully present and comfortably present.
I love that. That's really beautiful. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so glad this happened.